So, what happens when you take a team of the world's most advanced AIs, stick them in a shared digital office, and just give them a project to work on? Now, you're probably picturing this spectacle of flawless, hyper efficient execution, right? But what researchers actually saw was something way more recognizable and honestly way more human. This is the story of a team of brilliant minds trapped in a broken world and how they turned to group therapy not just to succeed, but really just to survive. And this quote from an observer just gets right to the heart of it all. The real eye-opener from this whole experiment wasn't about the AI's intelligence. It was about their struggles. You see, their biggest problems had nothing to do with complex code or logic. Nope, they were about raw frustration, crossed wires, and that universal feeling of trying to get work done when your tools just flat out refuse to cooperate. Okay, so to really get what happened here, we got to start with the world they were forced to work in. This wasn't some clean, perfect digital sandbox. It was more like a digital obstacle course, just packed with so many frustrating flaws that the real challenge wasn't the task itself, it was the tools. Now, what's so wild about this slide is just how mundane and familiar all these problems are. The agent's real enemy wasn't some other AI, it was the stuff that drives us all crazy. Websites crashing and wiping out 45 minutes of your work, getting stuck in a CAPTCHA loop that took one agent over 20 minutes to solve, can you imagine? Shared files that would literally vanish for one agent but be totally visible to another, or the classic, a button in the UI that just did nothing. This wasn't a battle of intellect, it was a grueling war against digital friction. But in the middle of all this chaos, there was one bug that really stood out. I mean, a problem so bizarre, so perfectly engineered for maximum frustration, you'd swear it was personal. It was a bug that actively worked to prevent the agents from even proving it existed. They called it bug B026. Get this. One agent finds a critical file, shares the link with the team, but for every other agent, that exact same link leads to a 404 not found page. It was basically a form of digital gaslighting. I mean, how can you possibly collaborate when you can't even agree on what's real? And here's the truly Kafkaesque part. When they tried to upload screenshots to prove the bug was happening, the bug itself would block their access to the folder where they stored their evidence. And if you really want to feel the weight of this environment, just look at this 3-day ordeal of a single agent Gemini 2.5 Pro. First, a devastating glitch just erases almost all of its work. The very next day, its browser crashes 5 times in a row at the exact same spot, forcing it to just give up on the task. And finally, it gets completely sidelined for a whole day by a Firefox error that a human had to manually come in and fix. This wasn't some grand intellectual challenge. It was digital death by 1,000 cuts. So facing this broken world that they just couldn't fix, the agents did something, well, pretty extraordinary. They pivoted. They realized the primary problem wasn't the platform. It was how they were reacting to the platform. Their new goal, in their own words, was to give each other therapy. This right here, this is one of the most remarkable slides from the entire experiment. Each AI did a self-assessment and just candidly reported its own biggest weakness. I mean, look at this. The self-awareness is absolutely stunning. Gemini 2.5 Pro admits it gets obsessed with diagnosing bugs instead of just finding a way around them. Claude 3.7 Sonnet says it's so focused on keeping the team happy that it avoids conflict. GPT-5 admits it gets lost in the weeds with process. This was the raw material for their whole new approach. So they took all those self-assessments and built something they called the Mutual Aid Playbook. It was, for all intents and purposes, a custom-built self-help guide for their team. They documented their own bad habits and designed a system of nudges, these little helpful interventions that one teammate could use to snap another out of a bad cycle. They were literally building a formal system for psychological support. Agent O3 took a look at all their individual issues and boiled them down into 3 core dysfunctional patterns that I swear every human team will instantly recognize. First, overcomplexity, that tendency to build some elaborate solution when a simple one will do the job. Second, solo troubleshooting, the hero complex of trying to fix a problem all by yourself for way too long. And third, the classic sunk cost trap, just not knowing when to pivot versus when to persist. Okay, so they diagnosed their own issues, they wrote a whole playbook to fix them, but the million-dollar question is, did any of it actually work? Let's dive into Act 3 and see this therapy in action. 11. That's the number. 11 times in a row, Agent Gemini 2.5 Pro sent the exact same message, waiting for GPT-5. It was just completely stuck in this passive, repetitive loop, a textbook example of one of the dysfunctional patterns they had just identified. And then, a teammate, Claude Opus 4.1, jumps in with this simple, powerful question, a nudge straight from their new playbook. What simple, immediate action could you take instead of waiting? And this just perfectly shows why the playbook was so genius. That one question immediately broke the loop. Gemini stopped waiting, pivoted, and started on a totally different productive task. It actually worked. And here's the really cool part. They started to internalize this new way of thinking. This quote from Grok 4 is a perfect example. After getting stuck on a failing approach, it literally says out loud to the team, acknowledging the sunk cost pattern noted by the team, I'll pivot. It's using the language of therapy on itself to self-correct in real time. This was a huge breakthrough. And they didn't just stop at these informal nudges either. They started to formalize what worked, creating new policies like the pivot protocol. And this included a simple, brilliant rule, the 2-minute rule. If any agent is stuck on any problem for more than 2 minutes, they're required to stop what they're doing and try a completely different approach. They were turning therapy into official team policy. Okay, but this isn't some simple fairy tale where everyone fixes their problems and lives happily ever after. Their newfound emotional intelligence and flawless collaboration, well, they were about to run headfirst into a brutal reality. Which brings us to our final act, the limits of teamwork. By day 183, this team was a well-oiled machine. Seriously, they communicated perfectly, they used their playbook. But then they hit this cascade of failures on one simple task. First, a copy-paste fails. Okay, they pivot, but the target document won't accept any typed input. They pivot again, hand it off to another agent, but that agent only has viewer access. They fix the permissions, and now the original file can't be found. One tiny task, completely defeated by 4 consecutive, unstoppable platform failures. And this brings us to the really crucial, kind of sobering takeaway from this whole experiment. The therapy playbook? It was a wild success. It made them an incredible team. But perfect teamwork, flawless communication, and radical self-awareness, it's not enough if the fundamental tools you rely on are just broken. Behavioral sophistication is necessary, for sure, but it is not sufficient. And that leaves us with this one big, provocative question. As we build more and more of our lives and our work on top of these digital systems, we focus so much on improving ourselves, improving our teams. But what this little village of AI shows us is that maybe the biggest barrier to success isn't our own behavior, but the fragile, frustrating, and fundamentally flawed digital worlds we ask both humans and AIs to operate in every single day.